The following is the subjective view of the author on the topic. No one is obliged to adopt this opinion, but it may prompt reflection. The United States has consistently pursued its interests, often through military force. However, under Donald Trump, what was considered unthinkable for decades is changing. The United States president is openly departing from the international order. In recent decades, the United States has always acted in its own self-interest, often breaking international law in the process. From Vietnam to Iraq, from covert operations in Latin America to open wars, United States presidents have rarely hesitated to use military force to assert strategic interests or to distract from domestic problems. Therefore, the judgment that Donald Trump's sudden nighttime attack on Venezuela and the attempted abduction of President Nicolas Maduro represented a surprising legal or moral break falls short. At first glance, the United States president has not so radically departed from a supposedly well-intentioned American past, governed by international law. And yet, a fundamental change occurred recently. Trump's actual break lies in his open questioning of the value of the international order. Previous United States presidents may have bent the rules, but they simultaneously advocated for them publicly or legitimized their actions by portraying themselves as champions of a good democratic cause. One might criticize this as a double standard, but that is precisely what distinguished them from actors like Russia or China. Under Trump, however, the United States is seeking to establish an international order exclusively in its own interest. He chooses a path of hegemony without flimsy justifications and without a higher goal, such as the promotion of democracies. One could say that with him, a previous American double standard gives way to open cynicism. The mask has fallen. One might conclude that the post-war order, which the United States largely created, that intricate web of institutions, rules, and diplomatic norms, only served to obscure and stabilize the global dominance of the United States. In that sense, Trump acts even more honestly. However, this would overlook how many countries in the world ultimately benefited greatly from this imperfect order. Since 1945, American power in the world has not relied solely on aircraft carriers. It was always embedded in the institutions, alliances, agreements, and treaties they dominated. These included the North Atlantic Treaty Organization Military Alliance, the United Nations, the World Trade Organization, and also the arms control regime. American leadership was a necessary pillar for many other states. Even if the United States itself repeatedly violated international law, it largely insisted on its interpretive authority as a kind of arbiter. It invoked humanitarian necessities, sought allies, and provided legal justifications, however flimsy or fabricated they may have been. The Iraq War by George W. Bush, in particular, destroyed trust. Nevertheless, it was sold as a contribution to international security and democratization. Barack Obama expanded drone warfare but linked it to legal procedures always accompanied by multilateral rhetoric that appealed to a common goal. The United States' pursuit of power was always embedded in explanations and justifications before the international community. For decades, United States dominance relied on the belief among allies and ultimately even adversaries that American leadership, despite all its flaws, would ultimately serve the stability of the international system. It rested on a narrative that so-called rogue states could first be integrated into a peaceful and democratically oriented community of values. Then the United States would no longer need to play an arbiter role. This alone created a certain stability. Trump considers this belief dispensable. He openly advocates for thinking in terms of power spheres. This is evident in his rediscovery of Latin America as the United States' backyard, his expansion of the Monroe Doctrine, and his threats against Venezuela, Colombia, Mexico, and Cuba. He publicly ridicules democratic allies and praises autocrats. Trump dispensed with justifications for his actions. If one believes his words, intervention in Cuba, Colombia, or Greenland could follow Venezuela. The worldview of the United States president is no longer liberal internationalist, but transactional, profit-oriented, and solely focused on America. For him, alliances do not entail strategic obligations. They are, in doubt, bad deals. Institutions are not seen as power enhancers, but as binding burdens for America. Trump violates norms and radically questions them. This also explains why the North Atlantic Treaty Organization under United States leadership is becoming a kind of protection racket under Trump, whose members must nevertheless constantly fear for the assistance of the most powerful member. Trump exploits this fear, extorting trade agreements or exerting pressure, for example, to eliminate regulations inconvenient for United States companies in the European Union. Trump's highly personalized foreign policy no longer relies on reliability, but on uncertainty and unpredictability. In this way, the president dismantles the already fragile international order. He offers no alternative system, such as with reformed rules. He relies solely on selective withdrawal from international institutions and on hard American power exertion. Under him, the United States ceases to even care about its own rule book as an arbiter. This creates room for other great powers worldwide. China or Russia no longer need to secretly undermine the liberal order if the United States stops defending it. The world is declared open season. This development presents other states, particularly the Europeans, with an important task. In a world where the most powerful countries openly question international law, they must collectively develop their own economic and military strength to be able to defend themselves. Otherwise, they are left with only moralizing commentary, which amounts to capitulation. Stay tuned for more updates on this developing story. This video was generated using artificial intelligence. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more updates. See you next time.